Hi, dads and those who love them. We're going to do things a little different here with the Nonprofit of the Month episodes. We're going to add them as bonus episodes instead of attaching them to one of the episodes themselves. The reason for that is I'm going to try to get the episodes down from two parts to one. They may at times be a little bit longer, but it just seems like the second part isn't being listened to as often. And I really think those are just as important, if not in some cases more important. So, this episode of the Nonprofit of the Month is the Council for Juvenile Justice Administrators, or otherwise known as CJJA. Their executive director, Mike Dempsey, was gracious enough to sit down with me and talk about the work that they're doing. I've been around this organization now for about 6 to 7 years, and I am really impressed with all the people that have been a part of it. And I wanted to highlight the great work they're doing with youth. So, enjoy this episode. And don't miss another episode of Love Being a Dad. Go to lovebeingsadad.com or join us on any of the social media, like our page, and especially go and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Thanks. And I love being a dad. All right, listeners, I am going to do a quick interview here for this month's Nonprofit of the Month. And this month I chose the Council for Juvenile Justice Administrators, otherwise known as CJJA. And with me today, I have the Executive Director, Mike Dempsey. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Tim. Happy to be here.
Well, you and I met probably 6, 7 years ago now, and I started doing a little work through the company that I work for currently, the MANT system, with you. We've become a sponsor, and really in that time, I have truly become a believer in the work you're doing. So I wanted to spotlight a little bit of that work. Up until this point, we've had a lot of looking at in my interviews youth and what happens, especially when dads aren't involved and what's going on in that. And what I wanted to do is also highlight what's going on that's really good. So if you could, for the listeners, just explain what CJJ is and kind of the mission of the organization.
Sure. So CJJA is a national nonprofit organization. We were created in 1994. And we work to improve conditions of confinement of the youth secure correctional and detention facilities across the country. All 50 states are members of the organization. And then we have about 15 to 20 locally operated juvenile justice systems that are members of the organization as well. So places like Los Angeles County, San Diego County, New York City, places like that, the larger jurisdictions that are also members. And then we meet twice a year at what we call our annual business meetings, where we provide each of the agency directors with best practice presentations, trainings, education, and then additional resources to help them improve the services that they provide to the youth who are entrusted to their care.
Okay. And Mike, what your background prior to joining CJJA and in your role as the executive director, what did you do prior to coming to CJJA?
So I've got about 38 years of experience working in both the adult correctional system and juvenile justice systems. I've been primarily focused on juvenile justice system work for about the last 18 years. I have served as a facility director, facility superintendent, as well as an agency director in the state of Indiana, where I served as the executive director for the Indiana Department of Juvenile Services.
All right. And CJJA, the body that makes that up, it's a smaller group, but it's really made up of a lot of those states and those primary directors. What do you see in your time there as the key component of what the work that CJJA is doing? What do you see as some of the big differences over the last, let's say, 18 years of your time in youth, from when you started to what is happening now in today's culture of youth detention?
Yeah, so that's a big question. Certainly, an awful lot has changed over that time period. primarily focused on improving the overall culture
Okay.
and the environments of the secure facilities, um, working towards reducing incidents of violence that occur in the facilities, whether they're fights, assaults, major disturbances, those type of things. Working to reduce those and improve the staff's ability and how they respond to those types of incidents in a way that is more rehabilitative focused,
Okay.
treatment focused, and just overall better attempting to better prepare staff to work with the youth who are entrusted to their care. That involves an awful lot,
Yeah.
clearly. Um,
So one of
yeah,
the things that you're doing is superintendent's training. That's fairly new in the last few years.
absolutely.
Talk to the listener a little bit about what that means. What's going on there?
Yeah, so facility superintendent training program is actually a 6-month training program.
Yeah.
Up until several years ago, there was no training program available for juvenile specific superintendents. There has always been, at least for the last 20 years, there's been an adult model of training program through National Institute of Corrections that was available to adult facility superintendents, but there's never been anything that was focused specifically towards those superintendents of juvenile facilities. So we bring together twice a year. We bring together various cohorts. They usually compose about 35 to 45 juvenile facility superintendents, and they go through a regimented training program. It's about a week-long training, in-person training
Yeah.
program, followed by various webinars, and they're provided with mentors and coaches
Yeah.
that are available to them throughout the 6-month training program. At the end of the 6 months, each facility superintendent has to submit a corrective action plan that
Yeah.
is submitted to CJJA and to OJJDP, who's the funder of the project.
Yeah.
And they focus that corrective action plan based on the information and the resources and the training that they received on what they're going to focus in on for their facilities to improve those conditions of confinement and reduce incidents of violence. A lot of that's going to also involve, how reducing the number of physical, chemical, and uses of force that occur in their
Yeah.
facility, as well as reducing the use of room confinement and isolation practices.
Yeah. And part of, when you and I met, I talked to you about my desire with some of that exact same stuff in my history. And we've, had the honor of working together on a code of practice that highlights some of the things that need to happen. Do you see this as a huge benefit for organizations across the country? We start to look at uniformity more for youth as opposed to what you mentioned earlier, the adult models?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the course of you know primarily the last 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
um, systems have really focused on making sure that they are detaining and
Right.
committing the right type of youth. So, diverting a lot of the lower risk youth to community intervention programs.
Yeah.
Those changes have really substantially impacted what the populations of the facilities look like.
Yeah.
Uh, in many cases, the population levels have significantly declined over the course of the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what has also happened is those populations have become older,
Hmm.
and they are more concentrated on higher risk youth as
Yeah.
well. So there's an awful lot of youth who are in the facilities, whether they're detention facilities or the long-term committed facilities, who have much higher needs, much higher mental health needs as well.
Yeah.
And that in a lot of jurisdictions have, at the same time, a lot of jurisdictions have changed, increased the age of
Okay.
youth who are able to be held in juvenile systems across the country. So we've gone from populations that were a mixture of low, medium, and high risk youth and primarily around between the ages of 12 to 17. And
Mm-hmm.
now that population is typically all high-risk youth. And
Okay.
the ages are primarily between the ages of 15 and up to 24, up to
Okay.
24 years
Yeah.
old in cases. So, our facility directors and the facility staff are now working with a completely different type of youth, much
Yeah.
older youth, and we really need to adapt our training practices so that they have the right skills to work with this different type of population than what they have historically been working with.
Yeah. And again, you're making great strides in changing cultures. What do you still see as maybe the biggest challenge or hurdle that you as an organization at CJJA face in accomplishing all the things you want to do?
Good question. I think that there's we have a long way to go in
Yeah.
regards to transforming the overall culture and the environments of the facilities.
Yeah.
In many cases, they're old facilities.
Yeah.
They've been, in a lot of cases, they've been adapted from various prior uses. A lot of
Right.
juvenile facilities used to serve as a mental health facility.
Okay.
They have been adapted be used as a correctional style
Yeah.
facility now. So they're outdated, they're old, they need a lot of resources to
Yeah.
improve the environment physically.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of work needs to be done to soften those environments
Yeah.
and to make them more home-like environments,
Okay.
more therapeutic-like
Mm.
environments,
Yeah.
trauma-informed environments
Right.
is an important element. So along with that, in the training piece that I mentioned earlier about having to revamp the types of training that we provide to the staff who are now working with a different type of population. And then, family engagement,
Yeah.
bringing parents to the table and making sure that they're part of the process in this rehabilitation program and therapeutic program so that they're able to be better prepared for when their youth return home.
And do you have programs then that are in place, or is that kind of localized to the organizations themselves to help with that? Again, it's a dad podcast. One of the things that I've been saying that I've seen, at least in the last 7 years, when I've been more concentrated working alongside your group and others, is that sometimes there's not a dad influence or a good male influence in the life. Sometimes that trauma history may be the result of that. Are there programs out there that are kind of also helping on that side of getting parents better equipped to parent their youth when they come back?
There are some, there's not
Yeah.
near enough.
Okay.
A lot of jurisdictions are developing some of those programs that you're
Yeah.
speaking of now.
Yeah.
They got a long way to go.
Okay.
We've come a long way in
Yeah.
the family engagement, parent engagement piece of this.
Yeah.
And parents are much more engaged in the lives of the youth while they are, committed to a detention or correctional
Yeah.
facility. So, getting them into the facilities and working with them on these treatment plans or
Yeah.
they're not just their treatment plan, but also their reentry and transitional plan as
Yeah.
they return back to the community and return back home is a incredibly important element
Yeah.
to their success. A lot of times, when we see youth who fail and recidivate after they've returned back to the community, that typically occurs within the first couple of weeks to a month
Mm.
of returning home.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with, in many cases, because we didn't do a very good job of preparing the parents,
Yeah.
whether it's the mother, the father, or grandparents in some cases,
Right. Exactly.
not properly preparing them for the challenges that they were going to be faced with when the youth return home.
Yeah. So, Mike, I've said this on a couple of the podcasts leading up to this spotlight is that especially for me, this isn't my world. It's become more and more my world, and it's a passion of mine. But I get the opportunity, and you do way more than I do, to go into these facilities, to at times interact with the staff and the youth. Um, And I just think if the general population knew, then they would have a bigger outcry, like to some of the things you're saying, like we need better programs for parents and we need better facilities for these kids. But they don't seem to know about it. How do we better expose kind of the general population on what the needs are for youth in especially the work that CJJA is doing? How can we better get that word out, do you think?
Well, I think your podcast is a really good start to that.
Thank you. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to do. We need to have the hard, honest discussions
Yeah.
about what are the conditions like in these facilities and what needs to be done to improve those environments so that we get better outcomes for the youth.
Yeah.
Many jurisdictions have really come a long way in what those facilities look like and feel like. And as a result, the more you improve those environments, the more you improve what that relationship between those direct care staff and the youth looks like and feels like,
Yeah.
you absolutely get better outcomes from that. But we absolutely need community help in doing that. Many facilities utilize community volunteers as resources to come in and bring in, fathering programs and other types of volunteer programs to help make meaningful activities occurring within the facility so that the youth build skills so that they're better prepared for that transition back to the community.
Yeah. So as a non-for-profit that's been established, where does a lot of your funding come from, Mike?
Well, a lot of it comes from donations. It comes from membership fees of our members. It comes from grants that we receive from the federal government. OJJDP is a big supporter of CJJA. We have several grants.
And for those that don't know what those letters mean, what are OJJDP?
Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. That's a federal agency under the Department of Justice. So they are big supporters and partners of OJJDP, and we all work together to help not just improve the overall conditions of the facilities and the environments of the facilities, but we work diligently to reduce incidents of violence and to get better outcomes, reducing the use of force situations and reduce the use of isolation practices in those facilities, and to get better long-term outcomes for the youth. We have a lot of focus on positive youth outcomes, and a lot of that is dependent upon those grant dollars, as well as I was just speaking of, volunteers from the community to come in and help provide those programs to the youth. We also do technical assistance programs. So we have, some of our funding is supported through direct contracts with various states or local county juvenile systems, where we come in and we do different types of cultural assessments, facility assessments, and staffing assessments. For each of the facilities, and then we make various recommendations on how they might be able to improve those services within the facilities.
Okay. So if there's a listener out there that says, hey, I've got some extra funds at the end of the year, or maybe a listener out there that says, hey, I've got a business and I'd love to kind of support what CJJA is doing, where can they go to do that? Where would they be able to go? Is there a place on your website?
There is. You can go to cjja.net, and there is a donation button located on the home screen. You can click that, and we would certainly welcome any donations for sure. We are always looking for support dollars to help us improve the work that we do and build the infrastructure to help make a significant difference on youth outcomes across the country.
And like we have before, listeners, we will post on our website, we will have a link page to CJJA where you can go to their website, go to some of their social media places and help donate. Like before, I've said, I won't put any of the nonprofits on there that I truly do not believe in. And so I'm always going to, put my time, efforts, or money into the organizations that are a part of this podcast. And so highly recommend that if you feel so led, go to the CJJA page, give a donation. Again, the money that you give is absolutely going to go to good things. They're doing amazing things in the culture of youth. And it's got to continue to be the way that it is, because we got to keep moving forward. Because like I said, I think if the average listener out there would actually go into your local facility for youth, I think you'd be instantly hit in the face with, hey, these folks need some help. And so, Mike, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everything you're doing at CJJA.
All right. Thanks for having me, Tim. Really appreciate the support and the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
All right. Thanks.